We'll start now. Great. I want to start today by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands and whose airwaves we meet today, and pay respects to elders past and present, and pay respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today. I recognise their continuing connection to country and their role in caring for and maintaining country over thousands of years, and of course, as Australia's first innovators. Welcome. On behalf of Cooperative Research Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you today. This is a record session, which we're expecting lots of questions. We've had more than 600 registrations, so there's a record interest in the CRC-P grants, which is testament to the value of them. We have a question and answer section. You can drop your questions in there. We will attempt to answer them towards the end of the session or as we go if they're easy, but please feel free as you're going to drop in questions. This is the agenda for today, and we will have a presentation from Martin Dent and then a presentation from Siobhan London. Martin is probably the foremost expert in Australia on the CRC-P grants. He's the manager of CRC projects in the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, and he's got a long history with the CRC program, having worked in the delivery of it since 2009 and in CRC projects since they began in 2016. His team is responsible for delivering the CRC project stream. And he's going to give you a great presentation shortly, but also will be on hand to answer questions. And then after Martin, I'll be inviting Siobhan London to speak. Siobhan, who has the coolest backdrop you can see, and that's because her company does some very cool stuff. She's a co-founder of AMSL Aero. And it's a company with a vision to build fully electric VTOL aircraft that can support defence efforts in remote and contested environments, amongst other things. She's been instrumental in AMSL's strategy to partner with the academic sector and companies to develop critical aspects of the aircraft. This has seen a dramatic acceleration in the maturity of the Vertilla, the company's plane, and from early small prototypes to the present full-scale prototype. In addition, she's overseen the core business of the company and has been focused on growing the product profile and its status in the market, and drove recent capital raise of $20 million for AMSL Aero. AMSL Aero has experience in the CRC-P grants and successfully won a grant in 2021. So she's going to bring the perspective of an industry person who's been through the process, applied, been successful, and is using that grant to advance their business, which is the whole purpose of it. Before I invite our two speakers, I'll just give you a little bit of background for those of you who are not familiar with Cooperative Research Australia. We seek to bring together all those who are involved in industry research collaboration and industry-led research. We were originally founded as the Cooperative Research Centres Association more than 30 years ago, and we include in our membership the wider network of CRCs and like organisations, universities, research organisation, industry partners, service partners, and individuals with an interest in industry research collaboration. There's a really positive story to tell in Australia, and programs like the CRC program and CRC-Ps are central to that. The sort of things that we do, we run information sessions like this. I'm delighted to have so many of you here today. But we also undertake benchmarking. We bring the community together in communities of practice and interest groups. We bring them together at our annual conference and at the National Innovation Policy Forum. We advocate for and celebrate the contribution of industry research collaboration to Australia and support that with a network of information sharing and learning. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Martin to give his presentation. Feel free to pop your questions in the chat as we go, but we'll answer the questions after both the speakers are finished. There's plenty of time for Q&A, so we're looking forward to a really rich discussion today. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Jane. And I'll just get my presentation up. I'm ready to go. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's amazing to see the demand on this round, and so that's really cool. I'd just like to associate myself with Jane's. I'm trying to get my slides to move forward. All right, got it. Jane's acknowledgement of the country earlier, and he acknowledged all any past, present, or emerging Indigenous Australians that are on this call, or and more broadly as well. So I've got a few slides to get through here. I'm going to move through them fairly quickly myself because I'm happy to share them afterwards. Just covering some of the broader elements of the program, and particularly delve into some of the details on the CRC projects for round 15. Here we've got the overall CRC program objectives. These cover the CRC-Ps as well as the larger CRCs. But also a further important outcome of the program is the increasing skills in industry and research organisations, particularly around their ability to collaborate. So you can see here some of the details on the CRC projects. We've held the first round in 2016. You got some of the program design settings there that haven't changed very much over that time. So we've been a pretty stable program. We've been holding rounds twice per year. We funded over 200 CRC-Ps, with the last 24 announced in round 14. But maybe something to look at is that average grant size of 2.2 million. It is an average, but all the grants that we've funded are available on our website. You can see they've ranged from just over $100,000 through to plenty at that maximum $3 million mark. That's the maximum funding available under the program. In terms of this round 15, when the Minister opened the round on the 3rd of August, he did indicate there'd be around $40 million available for funding in the round. That's pretty closely aligned with the last two rounds, where there was, I think, about 49 million and about 44 million over the last two rounds 13 and 14. The Minister did also indicate the priority areas within the round. We've got the specific area of circular economy there, but also the more broader priority areas around the National Reconstruction Fund priority areas, and then science and research priorities. So it is worth noting that although there's no specific funding amount allocated to any of these particular priorities, there's no specific amount for circular economy, no specific amount to be spread across the National Reconstruction Fund priority areas, but there is this $40 million around that available in the round. But if you do look at the NRF priority areas and the science and research priorities, they are fairly broad. So we find a lot of applications are able to align with one of them areas. The priority areas do come into effect when the committee is assessing applications. Criteria 1A does include the extent of alignment with the priorities. So I guess if you're in a priority area, that's where you can more fully and wholesomely address the selection criteria. The timeline for the round, I'm sure most of you are aware of this if you're thinking of applying. We close it 3 weeks tomorrow on the 14th of September. And that'll be a hard deadline on that date. We're expecting outcomes in December of this year, with projects starting from January of 2024. Some of you may not be aware as well, we've actually published a schedule through next calendar year as well, with round 16 is expected to be held in the first half and round 17 in the second half of 2024. In terms of key changes, but from last round to the next, there is a bit of an extensive list available on our website on business.gov.au, shortcut /CRC-P, gets you straight there. We made some fairly minor changes to the wording of criteria 1A and 4A around trying to make them clearer and easier to understand what the committee was asking for in them areas. We also, the most significant change, I guess, maybe impacting people that are applying, is in the budgeting side of things. We did reintroduce a third category of contributions, cash staff, which is intended to be the staff that you are providing to the contributions and that you are going to pay for out of the cash resources of a company or the research partner that's involved. So important thing to note, and we find we get this question a little bit, is if you're providing a staff member into the collaboration, if you're going to use grant funds to pay for that staff member, that's not a contribution. That's essentially getting funded for by the grant amount. So it's only a staff cash contribution or any other contribution if the company or the university or the other research partner is actually providing the resources with their own cash, essentially. In terms of eligibility requirements, there's several of them, and they're all detailed in the guidelines. We've been pretty consistent over the years. We've got this the minimum of 3 partners, 2 of which must be Australian industry organisations. The general requirement is you have an ABN and you're in trading or intending to trade as a Australian business partner on the application. You also have to have a research organisation. In summary, that's either an Australian university, a federal, state or territory government entity that's conducting primary purposes to conduct research, or a medical research institute. But if you are getting into the details on whether you're eligible or not, I encourage you to look at the definitions in the guidelines. When we're doing eligibility checking applications, that's what we use to check them against. And if you've got any further questions, you can either contact my team or come through our contact centre at business.gov.au if you've got any queries on that front. We get often asked a lot about success rates. I'm heading off some of the questions here afterwards now. So success rates, they obviously vary each round. It depends on, obviously, them key things, the number of applications received. Now, that's not in our control. That's essentially in the control of a lot of the people who are listening in on the webinar today. Obviously, the quality of applications, because we do have a minimum requirement of the committee does make a recommendation to the minister on the applications that it considers are fundable. So the quality drives the success rates, but also the funding available, which is that $40 million figure that I provided earlier. Based on that $2.2 million average, those can do their maths, would realise that's about 19 projects we expect to fund this round. So somewhere, I guess, between, depending on the numbers, 16, 17, maybe 21, 22, if they're smaller projects that come to the top of the pile, will be where we're able to fund this round. And then you've got the success rates from the last couple of rounds, 25% and 31% over the last couple of rounds. So that's been pretty good, we think. I'm jumping into some common issues now. We often get applications that come in where they're either spending more money than they're getting, or not spending all the money that's coming into the project. And when I mean spending it, essentially, you're asking for a grant amount, so a cash grant amount from the government. You're then going to, that's part of your cash resources. You also got all the cash contributions that you're putting in, whether they're the staff cash or the other cash that's coming in from the partners. And now all of that should add up to how much you're indicating you're going to spend on the project on the heads of expenditure through our application form. And we do have a financial workbook that we've set up that checks them things, provides validations. It's just a spreadsheet. It's available on our website on business.gov.au. And that does a lot of them checks internally. And it actually, we think, puts it in a way that's a bit easier to understand, and then it outputs it into the format that our application form requires it in. So please go in and use that. It'll help you get your application balancing. We check these things. We provide advice to the advisory committee around applications and their finances and that side of things. So please have a look at that. And I've also got a point there about my point before around not using grant funds to pay for a contribution, because then it's not a contribution. We obviously have these expenditure limits as well across the different elements of the application. Other things we find is people attach additional material to their applications. If you attach additional material, it won't be considered. It just doesn't get passed to the committee. If it's a business plan or something that's beyond the application form, we don't. If we get it, we don't even look at it often. And please check your application before you submit. When I say check, use the validate and save buttons within our form. There is several validations in there. If you're getting validation errors coming up and it's 10 minutes to closing, that can be pretty stressful, both for yourselves. So please do that early, validate the form, and even if you can, and my next slide goes to some of this, submit your application as early as you can. This is what we got last round. You can see we got about half of the applications in the last couple of hours. So it's a bit stressful for my team when these applications are coming in. I can't imagine what it's like out in the application, the people trying to get applications in. We always get some people who just don't quite get them in on time. So yeah, try to be in that first 50%, and there's more capacity to assist people, to be honest, as well, through our contact centre and my team, if you're having any concerns early on. But let us know early on if you're having any issues, and we can obviously help to resolve them. I'm not going to go through these one by one, but these are the assessment criteria. There's the other two assessment criteria are over the page. These are exactly what's in the guidelines, so don't necessarily, you can easily track these down. Like there, that you can see, they're all weighted. Each of the 4 has 3 sub-criteria, and I guess just trying to address these systematically is a good starting point for an application. We also do look at the value for money overall. So smaller projects, their outcomes are weighed up with the request for how much they're funding for, and the larger projects, like typically you'd expect them to have a larger outcomes and impacts and risk to be appropriately approached in them. So there's the other two assessment criteria. And I've got a couple of last slides on just a few tips and tricks around this. I think, plain English, that's a bit of a given. We've got a committee that's basically a group of generalists. They may or may not have expertise in your area. They're the ones making the recommendations to the minister. So look to be plain English. I think address the questions systematically, whether it's putting headings within. We find flexibility within your response to assessment criteria, so you've got some flexibility on how many characters you address to each subpart. But using headings can be a simple thing to draw when the committee's looking at it, to help them know where to look. But also note that the whole application will be assessed, the other components. So you don't necessarily need to repeat yourself within it as well. So there's elements. You can cover things in one part which may, like for instance, the leveraging, how much grant you're going to leverage. The data for that's essentially your contributions in your application form. So you can just briefly mention it in your response to selection criteria, but understand the committee will definitely have access to that financial data. And to finish up, just a few more points on any other application issues. I think this last point here is particularly important. I think working with your partners early, having an agreed approach before you're even applying on how you're going to do things such as the IP, how the governance of project will work, how you'll manage it, how often you're going to have meetings of the project partners, that sort of thing, can save a lot of time and risk, and, like, to be honest, impact the success of the project in the longer run. And if you have worked their things out, tell the committee that in your response, because that will help them understand that that's one risk that's being managed within the project as well. So yeah, I really encourage you to look at that. That comes to the end of my presentation for now, and I'm sure I'll get plenty of questions when we get to the question part. Thanks very much, Jane.
Thanks, Martin. And we will circulate the slides in our thank you email after this, along with any links that are useful for you. Also be aware, if we don't get to all the questions today, we'll try to answer the questions we can and include them in the follow-up email too. I just wanted to draw your attention before I introduce Siobhan that on the question and answer section, you can actually vote for questions. So if you see a question there that is one you definitely want an answer to, please vote on that question. It'll make it much easier for us to work through the questions in a way that answer the questions the majority of people really want to know about first, and then work our way through the next set of them after that. Siobhan, I'm delighted to invite you to talk about your experience and also that very cool piece of kit you've got behind you on your backdrop there. Over to you, Siobhan.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you, Martin, because you covered a lot of the great bases. So yes, I'm Siobhan Linden, co-founder of AMSL Aero, and our elevator pitch, thank you, Martin, is we're developing Vatia, which is an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. It means it takes off and lands like a helicopter, but flies faster and efficiently like a plane. It's emissions free, which, we're building it to be powered by hydrogen and electric battery. In terms of our progress, we're a startup. We have approximately nearly 50 employees now, and nearly the great majority of them are very highly specialised aerospace, electrical, mechanical engineers. And we've got everything from veterans through to graduates working on this aircraft. The prototype is actually in the hangar that's beside me. I know I've got a lovely backdrop, but I'm actually in a very ordinary little office space as a small business at Bankstown Airport. We've got the luxury of a couple of hangars here, and this is where we're building the prototype. It's already flown earlier this year in regional New South Wales at a our test flight facility there. So, you know, our business is one of those ones that, you know, it's a sovereign capability. You know, we're working with the Department of Defence. We're working very closely with some universities, and it's cutting edge technology that, you know, we've now been at for about 5 years. And where we're targeting is in a few years' time, we'll have this aircraft being able to be used for both defence and civil purposes, whether that be aeromedical, so it can be used as a light air ambulance or to carry passengers, or be used for cargo or firefighting. So there's some incredible uses. We're working very closely with CASA, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and it'll be a very safe form of transport that hopefully you all get to use one day. So my experience, I've been asked to come today just to have a share in my own experience and that of the team here going through CRC-P, which we've found to be, you know, really quite, you know, because we've had experience with a few grants. This one has been quite simple and straightforward, and I think we've even been through the audit process, and that's been really, you know, helpful to go through that. And also we found if we just followed the instructions, it was all good. And we, you know, we always only reported expense that we could validate and had invoices for. So in terms of, I've got 5 areas I thought I would highlight, and I hope you find it helpful. And I'm not a specialist on the research university side, and I'm sure someone would have some experience to share there. But in terms of the first and probably the most important one is the relationship that you have with the research organisation. And that's not something you can develop overnight. It's not something I think, you know, that the CRC-P 15, if it's now starting right now and then you go and try and find one, I think that'd be, it'd be great. I think it'd be very difficult, and I hope it does happen if you're trying to do that right now. But from my perspective, we, you know, had a very established relationship already, which had taken many, many months, if not years, to develop with the university. And, you know, it requires that natural fit, doesn't it, between the academic researchers and the organisation. Not only are you working in an area that you both, you know, can see mutual benefit from, and but then there's also a fit between the academic researcher and your organisation, and you're both very aligned on what we can achieve together. And that's fantastic when you get to that. And we've got that relationship with a few now, or a couple, sorry, I should say. And that is incredible to get to that point. But it takes a lot to find the right people and the right circumstances of research. I mean, I think the ideal, and I know there's research out there around this, is to have, you know, your researchers in-house and, you know, working full-time on just your technology. But the fact is, a lot of academic researchers don't want to do that, and I understand it completely. They're in the position that they want to be in, and so this is the best kind of next situation, if you can make it happen. So in terms of the other area, project deliverables. So I think, and I can't take credit for this, but Andrew Moore, who started the company with me, and he spends a lot of time, because he's the engineer and the designer of the aircraft. We spend a lot of time up front with any partners involved, like just getting on calls, lots of calls, talking about, okay, what is it that we're going to go after? What's the clear project parameters? What are we going to deliver at the end of this? And then usually we have a spreadsheet that records this, that just has all the essential activities. And then we even have by row each activity, and then we'll have by column each of the partners and what their contribution is to each activity. So it's kind of, and we let them kind of populate that as well, because after the conversations, they can then document exactly what they'll be doing. And that spreadsheet is something we use then, if we are even successful in the application process, we then use that for tracking progress. So I'll get every partner to update that at the end of each quarter to tell us, you know, just if you can, please document for us, you know, what you have done against each activity. And it's got the timeline, so it's got who, and it's transparent across all the partners, so everyone can see what each person's doing or each party's bringing to the table. And then separate to that, with each partner, we also, this is prior to putting in an application, work through, okay, what resources are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to the table? What do you require from us? And this is where I think some people get tripped up because, you know, and we have that all documented and clear. And we work again, we ask the research organisation, for example, what do you think you tell us what you need? And then we can talk about it. And so they'll say, well, I think we need 2 postdocs and, you know, 1, you know, research student, or they'll give us the numbers and this is how much we think it's going to cost. You know, we need this software, and so they'll document that all down, and then we work out how much they're going to contribute and how much we're going to provide to them as well. And when I say we, it's not all grant money. It's potentially our money. So this is where it gets a bit confusing. I think sometimes there's a belief that the money's coming just from grant money, and it's not. I mean, we're putting in the lead applicant as the industry, and we're a small business, and money is expensive. We have to pay out of our own funds as well as grant funding. So it's fantastic to have both. But so what comes out of that, kind of once you've defined that, then once we're in a position we've all agreed what is the lead paying the university to be part of this process, and what is the university putting in from their own contribution. Okay, we're all clear. We can put in an application, and we don't put that in until we have agreed and everyone's okay with it too, and we've documented it. Because if you are successful, you then need to go back and agree contractual terms. And if it's all been agreed in advance, it makes it really clean. And we've done this for everything. And Andrew used to be a bid manager, so in a defence prime. So I think he was very used to this process. And he's always got quotes up front and the documentation. So we kind of get everything documented before we even put in an application. And then I think on the financials, I would say, again, we even kind of clarify how that will work in practice before we put in the application. Like, so if we are successful, what our expectations would be is that, you know, here's the standard partner agreement, just so you can see, this is what you'd need to sign up to, and it's off the website. So it's there, sitting there, you can provide it from the resources. And then we'd also say, we'd also enter into a contract with you that provides the payment we're going to give to you, and then also has what deliverables you will have to us. So that's a separate commercial arrangement. It's kind of outside the grant agreement, and it sits outside it, but just so everyone's aware of how it will work, and that will address, you know, IP and all those other items as well. So you can do it in the one partner agreement, but that becomes sometimes I find with the timing, I have to put we put the partner agreement in, and then we do that separate contract, and it's just that's how we currently work. And I know everyone might work differently. And then on the IP, this is probably the other big area that you need to have an upfront discussion before you put in an application. And this one, I don't think there is a set formula, and I think each situation will turn on its merits. But what I would ask is, you know, and we've been able to work through this really well, is that each party just be very open about what's fair and reasonable. So I think the kind of standard approach is usually each party owns their background IP. And look, I'm sure there's incredible specialists on the line here who are far more experienced in this area than I am. But, you know, usually that's what we'd kind of agree, that each party owns their background IP. And then when it comes to the IP that's been created, and that's where it's really, okay, how much are you paying for that, first of all, the lead to the research organisation, you know, and how much is the university bringing to it, and then how is that IP going to be used in the future? Like, what does the university need from it? What do you need from it? As a lead, as a commercial organisation, if you're paying for development, you usually want to own it, the development piece. But if you're not solely paying for it, you don't usually want to co-own it. You usually want a license, or so there's a piece there you just need to work through in good faith. And I think most of the time you'll get there if you're both just open about, okay, what you're bringing and what you want out of it. And I think from a small business's perspective, we care about, okay, if this is not successful, what does that mean? If it is successful, what do we own, and how do we commercialise it? How will that work? I mean, what are you going to do with it after this? How will it help your research and working through that? And I think the final area was more about just the nature of relationships and the contracts, which I think I've been through, but just to mention that there is that commercial contract, and where the lead is the contractor and the university is the university is the contractor, and they're like, so you have to have a standard kind of commercial agreement, and sometimes that doesn't sit well in the normal terminology for kind of universities and grants, and so it's just being clear about what that is. And also with research and publications, of course we want to be very supportive of publication, but we'd also want to be able to vet to remove anything that's commercially sensitive or maybe used by a competitor. When we've spent all this money on development, we want to make sure it's not just handed over publicly. So just making sure that's kind of protected is important as well. And then just on the process front, 2 quick points, and then I'll finish, is, we didn't succeed with our first application, and so we applied again. We did take lessons learned and got feedback from the team there, in Martin's team on the first time, and use that to improve. And so sometimes it takes a couple of tries. And then the other one, the customer service manager. We've had, a few different customer service managers we deal with over the years, and they've, all been really responsive. And I would say just, no question's a dumb question. And if you need to make changes, or you're not keeping up with payment, or, there's something that you're not doing, you feel like you're falling behind on, whether it's a deliverable, or being upfront about it, and just having a chat about it, because you can usually work it out, and that's much better than just hoping that they waiting to them to come and talk to you. So that's the finish of mine.
Fantastic. Thanks, Siobhan. That was really great, and great to hear from the perspective of a small business that's engaged in this program. And it's a good reminder. I know we have lots of people from the university sector online. The nature of these grants is that they are designed to be industry-led. They're designed to foster that relationship between industry and research organisations. And Siobhan, in your 5 areas to highlight, which was really useful, you talked about how important that relationship with the research organisations has been for you. Of course, it's vice versa for research organisations. Their relationship with the business, or the businesses that they're working, the industry partners, is really critical. I just wanted to kind of tease that out slightly before we get to there's lots of technical questions on the side. To get a sense from, we often will hear from universities how they develop those relationships. It's really good to hear from the other side. So it'd be great to have a sense from you, how long did it take those relationships to develop? And what, you've talked about doing lots of kind of talking to each other, working out, being really clear about what the shared objectives are, what the deliverables are, managing those expectations. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that experience? Because I think, particularly for those who are just starting down this path, it's really useful to know it doesn't happen overnight.
No, but this is where the engineers kind of talk to the engineers. So I would say the outreach from us. So one, it's a little unfair in that Andrew was doing his PhD at the time. So he was lecturing, and so he had access to a lot of academics, and so that was very helpful. The other university, though, that comes to mind was opportunistic in that, they crossed paths, Andrew and some of these engineers, and I'd have to go back to find out the exact source, but they're doing some really leading research in the area of propulsion that works really well for us. And so I think seeking them out, yes. So there's lots of different forums that we attend across industry, and particularly in aviation. So within the industry where these kind of chance meetings come up. But Andrew also reads, and the other engineers read about they're reading the research all the time. So they know who's working on what around the country, and we'll reach out to them. So I don't have much more than that. I'd have to ask ask the others on the team if you wanted more.
No, that was it was a really helpful sense. But we have lots of questions, so keep voting them up to help make it easier. Some of them will be quite quick answers. Others will require a little bit more discussion. I'm also going to try and balance so that we don't just end up with Martin quickly answering a lot of questions and we don't draw Siobhan's experience too. So let's kick off with some of the common questions, and not surprisingly, Martin, they come up around cash staff contributions and leveraging. So there's a couple there. There's one there around cash. It's been voted up. 22 people have voted, so there's a lot of interest in that one. Around contribution, the cash and cash staff contributions from a research provider to the CRC-P. How do they contribute to the leverage amount for the Commonwealth funding?
Well, the short answer is yes, they do. They do count. To be a partner, you have to make a contribution. If you submit an application with 0 contributions for one of your partners, we don't consider them a partner. So most definitely, yes, they count.
Excellent. The next one is you may or may not be able to ask, but again, a lot of people have put this in. It always comes up around R&D tax incentives, and we do actually try, just so people know, we do try to run some sessions too with the R&D team to answer some of these sorts of questions that come up. But there's a question there is, if you contribute cash staff, are those costs able to count towards the R&D tax incentive still? Do you know the answer?
Well, given that's not my program, and it's in relation to your tax, I really think you get some formal advice on these ones from either the contact through our business.gov.au, because we do deliver the R&D tax incentive program in our department, but also in collaboration with the ATO. So I know they'll work on responsibly on that front.
Great. And we'll put that R&D one, we'll put the link in there for you to the R&D tax team as well. Next one, this is an interesting one. Can a 3.5-year PhD student be included in a 3-year CRC-P grant?
So students, fellowships, stipends and scholarships are eligible expenditure. If you're expending money outside of the grant period, then it's not eligible expenditure essentially. So you can include it, but you'll have to have a plan on how you're going to support them beyond the term of the project, whether it's 3 years or 2 years or 1-year project even. So yes, eligible expenditure, but need to have a plan on supporting it outside of that.
Excellent. Some questions related to the new cash staff category. Should a university's contribution of PhD scholarships towards an application be counted as cash in kind or cash staff?
I'd say, yeah, PhD students, not staff, so they should just go into a cash contribution from the university towards the team, as long as they're not using our funds to then reimburse it, which you can do, but then if you're doing that, it shouldn't be a contribution. That's
great. Now, I'm actually going to just go to the question about IP here is an opportunity to bring Siobhan in, because you talked, Siobhan, about needing to have that upfront discussion about IP and that there is no set formula. There's a question here from Michelle Hill about how much detail is required for the proposed IP arrangement. Siobhan, I want to get a sense from you as a small business how much detail you put in, but also how much time you dedicated to that upfront discussion, and then I'll throw to Martin for the technical, the program answer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'll definitely get Martin to comment on the actual criteria in the application, because I haven't looked at the latest application to see what it asks. And but yes, I think being really clear about what the IP situation is, so the background IP and also any IP that's derived from the project, and whether that's been who owns it or whether it's licensed or assigned, and then rights to commercialisation should all be definitely discussed and agreed upon, is my suggestion before you put in the application, because you will need to answer it as well.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there's quite a bit more. There's the detail that you provide the department that you need to answer those questions, but there's also the bigger piece that you've done as a participant in the program that's important. So what you need to provide the department is essentially the minimum you need to be thinking about rather than the maximum. Martin, did you want to speak to the expectations of the department for the applications?
I guess only to the extent of look at the accession criteria. There's a couple of mentions of IP. Well, one implied around planning and governance arrangements for the project in criteria 3, and then another part of criteria 3 around specifically how you're going to manage risks around the IP protection as well within your company. So, and it's like so about that planning, demonstrating your work with partners is a real big benefit. I think something that'd be good investment in people's time prior to applying.
Excellent, thank you. So there's a interesting question here for Arun. Arun, you are one of our biggest question askers, and I noticed getting voted up too. So it's great to see you're participating. You've got there. This is an interesting one. Once a grant's awarded, if an industry partner who committed a cash contribution decides to withdraw, and this often has SMEs in it, and SMEs can sometimes be a little fragile. How does what does the CRC-P, how do the lead partners manage that? Do they need to go and find a new partner to cover the shortfall? How does that play out, and what happens in that circumstance?
So when that occurs, I guess we work with the applicant. I'm assuming it's not the lead industry partner that's departed, and work to what options they've got, what they can come up with. I think that was specifically asking around. Do we require the shortfall? Well, I guess our question would be, well, this is what you said the project is going to cost. So I would expect the shortfall would need to be made up. Otherwise, if you can do the same project for the reduced cost, why didn't you come to us with that better value, I guess, project in the first place? So we'd want a strong explanation if you were going to significantly drop it. And then essentially we'll make a judgment and put it to essentially the program delegate on if that project's still operational. But we do aim at trying to support applicants and grantees in the end to reach their project outcomes. So I guess it's a little bit depends a lot on the specific circumstances, but it doesn't happen that often. But when it does, we generally find the applicants do manage to sort of find another partner, and then we have to consider whether that project's still what was supported and essentially and going back to approved by the minister in the first place.
Thanks, Martin. And it's always worth remembering with this the team involved in this and the purpose of these really want to see people succeed. They want to see these projects succeed because each of these projects help advance Australia's capability. And so the team that Martin leads, and I think Siobhan said this in her comments, they're very accessible, very easy to engage with and very responsive. So it's if you see, they're not blank faces. They're there, and there's a real. I think a hallmark of CRCs and the CRC-P projects is this desire to succeed because they really contribute something significant to the country. There's just a very technical question there, Martin, about the PDF on the application.
I'll provide that feedback back to our application system people. We obviously support our department, lots of different grant programs. You can, I think that applicant, that person does know that they can probably create one afterwards, but yeah, we'll provide that feedback through.
Now, I'm going to just jump quickly to, there's two questions that are quite closely related coming up. And these come up every time we have one of these information sessions. It's the question of international partners. And how, first of all, can international companies be industry partners? And in order for them to be industry partners, they wouldn't necessarily have an Australian ABN. So is that an issue? So, Martin, this is always one of the questions that comes up.
It's fine. It's not too bad a question. So they can definitely be partners in the project, international partners. We have, if you look on our website, we've got all the partners listed in the projects. We don't have them by country, but you can probably spot a few overseas universities and things in the list. However, if they need to meet the eligibility requirements to be the eligible industry partners in terms of the two industry partners. So when we do have an international partner and it's our fourth, fifth, you can see some projects had more than 20 partners on our website if you look far enough down the list. So yeah, plenty of internationals, but they can't be the eligible Australian industry entities.
Thank you. And look, there's a couple of technical questions to do from Ron, and then we're going to go to one where I'll throw to Siobhan about the feedback process and experience of that. I think it's one of the hallmarks of the program. But there's a couple of questions here from Ron. One is, should we include eligible expenditure items under the other category in the online application? So he's asking about contingency costs and costs related to publication of research and workshops, trainings, and other knowledge sharing events.
Yeah, you're getting pretty into the detail there. I guess I think so. Like, I'm saying that because it depends on maybe you might be able to fit the cost of a workshop might be a contract arrangement that you had, but I guess, yeah, I think thinking across the heads of expenditure that we do have, that's probably the best for them elements, as long as they're fitted within obviously the eligible expenditure more broadly, the direct. And one of the key things to think, is it a direct cost of the research rather than indirect cost? Because that's like a key test on eligible expenditure generally.
So then there's another technical question from Oren, which is, does the cash staff commitment from a staff member of a project partner require the specific project partner to transfer the corresponding staff salary and on costs to the lead applicant? Who would remunerate the staff member based on actual FTE? So I guess that's about whether you're seconding people, contracting.
I think the answer essentially is no. If a partner, whether it's the lead or any other partner, is spending money on the project, they don't need to do a transfer to the lead and then back to themselves again to pay for the staff member. The CRCs, the larger grants, that's my understanding how they operate. The money almost flow through the CRC company, but for the CRC projects, as long as a partner is spending money on the project, staff salaries, buying supplier costs, supplies, then that they can then report that through to the lead, who can then report that as contribution from that project partner in the collaboration.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Now, this is a question on feedback, and I have to say it's one of the ones we get often when people pick up the phone and ring us. So say, if I put an application, will I get feedback, or how do you know if you're getting it right? Siobhan, you've been through that process. You put it, your first go wasn't successful, but you engaged in the feedback process and then was successful the next time around, which is a common story. I've heard of people taking 2 goes to be successful, but when they've really engaged in the feedback process, it's often in a quite quick succession. Can you talk a little bit about your feedback process, how you engaged in it, how it worked?
Yeah, so I think from memory, this was a while ago, we had emailed feedback. So, and it was a couple of pointers, and look, that's really helpful because I realised the volume not even warrant any feedback in the future. So it's really a matter of, I suppose, their workload, but we were able to get some pointers by email back then. And we just requested it through the email address they provided.
Oh, sorry, Martin, did you want to speak a little bit about how you handle feedback? I suppose there's the formal feedback when you put an application in, but then there's also the capacity of people to sort of just really closely look at those the guidelines, notice the differences between each round, but also to tap into that expertise you have.
Yeah,
talk about that process.
So yeah, we do when you get your notification, if you're unsuccessful, it'll include a feedback in it, which is essentially a paragraph, and it might not look very long, but we do try to cover a fair bit of ground in that. That's feedback from our committee. We have worked with the committee to put that together, so that's very by them who are making the assessment. So that's in there. We are looking at a couple of things. We had a couple of comments from people in the last couple of rounds where they didn't actually realise because they hadn't read the whole email. They just read this unsuccessful part and sort of moved on, unfortunately. So we're going to put some, try to put some bold text saying feedback here, essentially. So yeah, look out for that if you are unsuccessful, and we're just trying to make that a little bit more upfront for them as well going into this round. But yeah, it covers things like, it might be saying your governance wasn't clear what you're going to do, your risk plans wasn't very clear, didn't think you were suitable for this program, or we encourage you to come back. There's sort of different things for different programs, and we do try to give a bit of an indication on sort of where you fell roughly within the applications as well, to give people indication of if that's essentially, a lot of people ask us, is it worth us reapplying? So that's side of things.
That's actually a great segue into something that comes up often. I get calls about, but and I think a lot of people on this call would like to know, do you see some particular issues that come up with unsuccessful applications repeatedly? It might be around governance or leverage, or not looking at the guidelines closely. I know that I love the graph you always put on the submissions, and I always hope that each year when you bring the new graph, each round you bring the new graph to show us that there's going to be a less dramatic climb to the end, but it doesn't ever seem to happen. So obviously getting the grants in on time, getting the application in on time, or even better, a couple of days beforehand is a good thing. But are there some common things that you see that are worth people really being mindful of when they're doing their applications?
I think like that plain English thing, the committee actually understanding it, they're looking at like a lot of these. Like every member doesn't read every single application. We do a bit of a process, but we do talk through every single application at the committee meetings one by one. So there is every single application considered. So a lot of things, easy to understand. Like having, I think some of the stuff Siobhan's talking about, having a plan up front around what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Like I think, and then that industry-led side as well. Like I think the committee can often see when applications are really like researchers looking for a problem to be solved and things like that. So actually having the true buy-in from the industry partners and the industry partners being engaged. Like I saw a question further down around like, can two different elements of the same company essentially be the eligible partners? Well, probably for eligibility, but to be honest, for collaboration and the objectives of the program, they're really going to struggle to convince the committee that's the case. And we do have a spot in our form where you do need to declare any links between the partners. So I guess there are a few thoughts off the top of my head on what we see.
That's great, thank you. There's a question here about the where things should sit on the TRL scale for this particular program. What's the view of the committee and of this particular program,
it's difficult to I guess say, like, depends on the project, depends on what they're claiming they're going to get to, what the next steps are of the project. Like, probably towards generally the later TRLs, but like we see lots of projects coming through on that 6 to 8. That's probably the typical range where you see them finishing. And between one TRL 6 and 7, it's like there's a fair bit of grey area in there, so it's not necessarily something that's a key part of the committee. But looking towards that more on the path to commercialisation in general. But you'll see, you look at some of our projects and what they're doing, some of them are a little bit more early stage, sometimes clinical research, which we know doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be selling stuff within like a year or two of that. It can take a bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, some people are working on projects that do take a while to get there. I mean, Siobhan's aircraft, I'm pretty sure in a few years' time we'll be really used to seeing those around. But at the point you went for the CRC-P, particularly the first round, that was some way down the track. I'm assuming, Siobhan. Sorry about that. There's another question here about the applicant company is if they're the first partner. So I assume that the lead. So such that it only needs one SME and one research organisation to sign partner agreements.
Well, we need all the partners to sign a partner agreement. So we sign a grant agreement with the lead partner. They then are required to enter into partner agreements, whether that's 3 different organisations all signing the one thing or the lead partner signing with each of the parties individually. But if you've got 30 partners, you need to have all 30 partners sign up to the partner agreement. And we won't make the second payment unless you've done that as well.
There's a really interesting question next. And I was just thinking of Siobhan talking about her CEO being an engineer and that being part of the origin and part of the relationship with the research institutions. There's a question there that says that in the guidelines, staff in-kind contributions from leadership, so CEOs, CFOs, etc., are not considered eligible. So that just means in counting for the contributions. If the CEO has considerable technical scientific input into the research plan or marketing for industry, is that considered eligible? I suppose this goes to the question of they're not excluded from participating in the project, but counting their time is a different one. So you see that?
Yes, I'm just popping up in the program guidelines. It says that it's not considered eligible expenditure. It says even if they're doing project management tasks. So I guess as far as that is, that's what our guidelines say. I can take that as feedback a little bit as well. I guess like what happens if this, and we can look at the next round, whether that's unrealistic, but that's what we would be applying. And essentially at the end of the day, that's what the auditors would be looking at when they're signing off your claimed expenditure against the project.
Great, thank you. Round 16 opening and closing, that on the website is the indicative months.
It says February opening, and believe March, pretty sure.
Yeah.
We'll open it. Yeah, the plan would be to open it for 6 weeks from February. So depends if we open in the first or second half of February.
Yeah, and so Kirsten, just keep an eye out. The department, when the minister announces the opening of it, there's always a release. We make sure that we put something up on our website and on our social media, and we try to hold one of these sessions each round. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, it's a good spot to get it. We always try to put a special edition out. As soon as Martin's team have got everything ready to go, we usually will send out a little note to everyone to say, hey, this is open now. So we include the links to the program so you can see any changes in the guidelines, etc., to it as well. Great question here from Rhiannon Jones around education and training opportunities. And do they need to be part of the formal program, or does upskilling the participants through collaboration within the project count towards this criteria? I might ask you to answer the technical side of the question, Martin, but then I'll throw it to you, Siobhan, to talk about how you integrate that education piece into your project.
Okay, I'll just jump in quickly and say, I guess the scope of the education and training activities is what you put towards that project. So yeah, for sure, upskilling of the partners in their ability to collaborate and they learn from each other. If you've got other things like you're going to be doing industry forums, or you've even got students involved, sure, that could contribute to it. It's worth 7 points out of the 100 points for the assessment, the education and training, just to put it in perspective for you. I think in the CRCs, the bigger ones, it's worth a little bit more. It's a little bit more emphasis put on it in the larger CRCs.
And Siobhan, it'd be really interesting to know how you've handled that education and training piece of your project.
Well, it's across a spectrum, everything from, the researchers, internships, community and industry forums. And we have a number of outlets there, sharing of what you've learned, with others who can use it. So across industry, kind of, manufacturers and so forth. So yeah, there's I can't go into the specific details, but there's a lot of areas that we participate there, and that's obviously critical to this funding.
Sounds like there's a plane taking off in the background.
I was about to say that's actually testing going on. So they're testing.
Excellent. So there's some more technical questions here. Again, to Martin, there's a couple here around how match funding expenses are managed. So does every listed expenditure need to be paid 50%, 50%, or is there flexibility in how people manage that?
So essentially, short answer is yes, flexibility. That's up to the project to work that out, how the best way to do that. And I just note it's not necessarily 50% the match funding. We leverage between 50% and sort of sometimes, I think in one project quite a while ago, we were only paying about 10% of the total project cost as well. But that we averaged probably about just under in the last round. The data's all on our website on how much the grant was and how much the total project value was. Get the difference between them two to get what the contributions were. So I think it was about for every dollar the government was putting in. Maybe just don't quote me on it, the data's there, but it's about $1.80. It was just under $2, I think.
Excellent. This is a common question we get too, actually, when people ring when they're thinking about it, is what the typical budget split is between partners. So, for instance, if there's a $2 million project with $1 million in grant funding, how much goes? Is it 10, 20, 30? It should be noted that a lot of these projects have different sizings in terms of partners as well. So some might have, just 3 partners, others might have 5 or 6. So it's obviously going to vary depending on that. But do you see a typical range there, Martin?
Well, that's not part of, I guess, our contract. We provide the funding to the lead industry partner, who then manages the overall, I guess, project, or works with their partners on it. So we don't get that visibility to that specific how they spend the grant money within the partnership. So, I couldn't answer that one. I can't give you a number anyway.
Yeah. I think that says it. What's going to work to deliver the project? There's another one on the PDF, printing a technical one, and then I'm going to group a few questions together. One about, can you print out your application before you submit it?
I think that's the last question. Well, not that I'm aware of, but we'll provide feedback about that people would like that capability within our application system.
Yeah, and we do often hear from people in both this and the other one that what they'll do is they'll do up their application in a separate document before they put it in, and check over it and then pop it into the
numbers can all go in the spreadsheet that I mentioned earlier that's on our website. And yeah, we've got the sample form, but you can't submit a sample form, but you can use that to see this where the questions are asked and things. Look out for the character counts as well. We've got a pretty strict limit on that. It won't let you submit it with your over.
Yeah. Now, there's some questions about eligibility, and I often get phone calls from people asking these questions. So one is about what counts as an industry partner. And so can a charity or an NFP count, but also can a state government department be one of them? And another one that I had that someone rang me about last week was asking, it's related to a state government because it was a hospital. Could a hospital count as an industry partner? So, Martin, can you maybe give us some guidance on what you mean by industry partners?
Well, I think our guidelines set out what we use as the rules. So essentially, ABN have an ABN and in trading or intending to trade. There's a few exclusions as well in our guidelines. I'm just trying to get there. So excludes a research organisation. So if you the research organisation as per a definition, or an entity whose primary purpose is to undertake research, so you might not squeeze into the research, might be outside of that, but also governments can't be, our guidelines exclude them from the Australian industry entity definition. And then there's a few other bits and pieces in there. So I guess charity, not-for-profit organisations, well, it depends on what they're doing. Are they trading, buying, like they're selling goods or services? So are intending to. That like something that we'll look into. We can answer that question directly. Give us the actual organisations, contact my team. The email address was at the end of the presentation. And the hospital ones can they be tricky because some hospitals are state-owned, some are they're not often conducting primary purpose to conduct medical research. So we do them a bit of a case-by-case basis as well. And they may be a medical research institute, the hospital arm or something, and are they part of a university as well sometimes? So yeah, we can help give some guidance on specific entities themselves.
That's great. There's some quite quick ones to answer here too around the research partners. So someone's asked if CSIRO counts as a research partner. And the other question is around can a university lead the project? So maybe we'll group those ones together.
Well, CSIRO can definitely be a research partner. I think they're even given as an example, or there used to be an old version of the guidelines if they're not already, but they definitely are. If you look at they're often partnering projects. And the second part, can the university lead it? Will not be the lead applicant. If you submit an application from a university, we will make it. We will essentially we'll basically be ineligible because you must be an industry partner. Can you lead it for eligibility wise? I guess eligibility wise, no. Can you lead the project in terms of coordinating it? It's on the eligibility question, but our committee does look for applications that are industry led. It's trying to solve an industry problem, not like I think I said earlier, not a problem that's being pushed by researchers onto the industry because they need some funding. But work together, the universities and the industry partners work together to put the proposal together. So our committee is pretty good at spotting the ones that are have had little buy-in from the industry partners and are just a submitting entity for the application as well.
Excellent. I'm going to jump to a few of the technical questions. So there's one here around, the question there, Ross, around the R&D tax credit. I think we'll send you the link in the follow-up email to the R&D team. It's the 50% contribution cost by the lead applicant eligible for the tax credit. So Martin, I think I should send that to...
they should go to the R&D tax team on that.
So we'll include that link for you. The next one was, if the lead organisation is an SME, can the project just consist of, and this is an interesting one because Siobhan, you were an SME when you went into, or you're still an SME, I guess, consists of the SME, a large company and a university. So Martin, I'll get you to answer the technical question. Siobhan, I might get you to talk about who the partners were in your CRC-P.
Yeah, well, essentially the answer is yes. Our guidelines just say you have to have two industry partners, brackets, including one of which must be an SME. So it doesn't matter if it's the lead or the other partner. So that combination, in that question, is more than fine. To be honest, most of our applications probably are from two SMEs because that test is 200 or more employees, and most of the companies in Australia are 200 or less meet the SME definition. So yeah, we get plenty of large companies as well, but that's eligibility wise, that's fine.
Siobhan, over to you.
Yeah, and likewise, we're a SME, and we've had the partner is a SME, another partner who's not a SME, but one of the users, and then but meets an ABN and so forth, and then the research organisation.
Great. Thanks, Siobhan. That's really, really helpful. And look, if you want to know what the partners look like and what each of the CRC-Ps look like, I really encourage you, we'll include the link in our follow-up email to have a look through the last few rounds. So Martin's team published all the successful grants. You can see the size of them, what the project was, and who the partners are. So that'll give you an idea of the variety of sizes, of partners, of timelines that have been successful. And it's really worth looking through those when you're considering applying, because it'll give you a really clear idea of the sort of things that are successful. I've got a question here for Martin. If one organisation out of 3 contributes towards all cash contributions, will we still be meeting the criteria?
Yes, there's no minimum. You don't have to provide. There's no minimum amount of cash, minimum amount of in-kind. It can be 0 cash in-kind from other partners, but does that really show that you're collaborating, that all the partners have got to not be equal buy-in, but a buy-in to the project? It may be because the in-kind is really significant that you're getting access to, but essentially, yes, for eligibility.
Great. And there's a very polite question here asking us to answer at our leisure. David's asked if you can provide some insight into the nature of in-kind contributions and the meaning of the word incurred in the accounting period. So whether that includes amortization of assets. Essentially depreciation of an asset. And I think there's even an example in our guidelines in Appendix C, I think, of the in-kind contributions of using depreciation and valuing it. It needs to be within the project period, and so valuing that at a reasonable valuation, that essentially in the end that you're confident that, you get an agreement from an auditor, because the auditor does sign off on all the eligible expenditure claimed during the project. Excellent. A great question about whether the goals of round 16 are the same as the goals of round 15. We'll know that when we get to round 16.
Yeah, essentially, if you're talking about priority areas, but yes, essentially, there is a review of the national science and research priorities that I'm guessing is working towards that. So when they're refreshed, we will be it's up to the minister in the end, the wording of the guidelines, but we'll be, I guess, we will update to reflect any new science research priorities if they're in place in round 16 opening.
Yeah, I mean, that's something to be really aware of with this particular program. It does reflect government priorities, so you want to be sure that you're thinking about that when you do your application. And I think Siobhan's example, you guys really looked at how you aligned with that. They do have often minor updates, but sometimes bigger updates each round. But the department really clearly publishes what those changes are between each department. So there's really clear dot points about these are the differences, the updates to the round, and always lets you know what those priority areas are. So those ones that Martin talked to in the beginning, each round, you'll see that published as part of the opening of the round. There's a question here from Ross about medical devices and research projects. And often we do get different questions with medical research projects because of that. They have some unique things. Would a completed research protocol be required to accompany the grant application?
Well, I don't necessarily speak the language of researchers in the medical field, but I guess if you're talking about the research methodology, and having it clear what that is and how you're going to deliver on the project, if we're talking about that, essentially, yes, that's part of the assessment criteria. I'm flicking through my guidelines here to try to find, criteria 2A, the research you'll do and the methodology you will do to deliver the project. So, essentially, but not attaching a separate document if that's what we're talking about. That, like I said before, that will, that won't be part of your application that's assessed.
Thank you. There's a question here from Arun, and this is about, I've heard this one before, about the inclusion of leasing costs for a test site where technology is being developed and being tested. Can that be included as part of the project?
leasing of what, I guess, maybe Arun, maybe come directly to my team on that one with a bit more detail, I'd suggest, because like some of that's illegible. I saw that question before and wasn't quite sure how to answer that one. So you see that CRC projects at industry.gov.au. Send us an email and we'll a bit more detail and we'll get back to you.
Excellent. There's one there about submission times. That's a decision of government, the timelines. I think in a way the significant difference that's happened over the last year is that the forthcoming rounds are published. So while the time between publishing the opening of them and the deadline is 6 weeks, you can see now 2 rounds out what the likely timelines are. Martin, do you think there's any likelihood of that changing, or is it likely to stay at 6 weeks? I don't know whether you've experimented with different times over the life of the program.
Well, I think if you look back, we've got the data. It has been longer at times. It's been pretty stable at 6 weeks for quite a while. I haven't had too much. That's probably the first time I've had too much pushback on feedback, like a bit longer. The challenge is the longer the time frame is, that's the longer before outcomes are essentially going to be known. So, if we made it 6 months, we wouldn't be giving you outcomes until mid next year. So, we're sort of trying to balance up time for applicants and then obviously time for assessment, ministers making decisions, and all of them different steps in the process to hopefully get some outcomes before the end of the year on this on round 15. But noted, and I'll we can think about that for future rounds.
And look, it's a really good question because we hear from the CRCs, which are much longer application processes, very big and often 10-year projects. And then it is a balance because this is aimed at industry-led research, it's aimed at SMEs trying to participate. And of course, the timelines that they have to operate on are much shorter than necessarily for research organisations. So it's an interesting one to try and strike a balance. And there's probably no perfect timing. There's a great question here about IP. Anisha's asked around how you clarify what happens with IP introduced into the project by one partner. Now, I would think this goes back to Siobhan's point about spending a lot of time up front with the partners, having a discussion about how you're going to manage IP. Siobhan, do you want to talk a little bit about you went through that process, obviously. You've got to think about background IP, whether it succeeds and all of that. Some of the things people might want to think about when they're working on that IP question.
Yeah, and an industry-led program, we're trying to get a commercial outcome, that's like at our company, that's good for the environment and good for the long-term sustainability of the business. So with that in mind, we're collaborating with researchers, and this grant kind of, I think, helps make that happen. And so when it comes to, whether it's a new component that we're developing for our aircraft, and it's a new kind of design, there's lots of ways you can get to it. But at the end of the day, for us to be able to use that technology in our business, we're going to have some rights over the IP. So I think just being really clear about how that will work, and I think, allowing the university to be able to continue to do the research they're doing, but also give the industry the ability to use what they're, if they're paying for it. So that's where I say it's open to the parties, because it really depends how much are you contributing as the lead partner to that development. How much is coming potentially via a grant? How much is coming via you? How much are they contributing? And I'll give you one example. With one of the universities, they had a method, and we were happy for them to carve that out of the project IP. So they maintained the method, but we owned the IP results, if you like. So what was inputted into that and what was output, which was, it's a very extensive process. But that was ours, and we were able to take that away and now use it commercially. So it is different in every situation, but be ready that industry will want to understand how they can then use it and it not be put out in the open market, like when you've spent money on development and time and everything.
It's good. It's good advice, and I think it's that pre-conversation, Martin. I think the department doesn't the department doesn't tell people how to manage their IP. It wants to know how they're managing their IP. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. We're not going to, particularly if their IP brings to the project, that's up to them to decide how they share and manage it in the collaboration.
That's great. Now I've got a few questions that I've just clicked will answer live, because I think we've got another sort of 10 minutes for questions for those who wish to stay on. But I'm just going to try and jump to a few questions that we see come up regularly. There is a question here where I put 10 to answer live, and now I can't see them. Oops. Here we go. So there's a good question here about how's all the funding provided? So say you've got a 3-year CRC-P project. Is it awarded every 6 months, every 12 months? I guess it's a good one to pop in something that Siobhan mentioned, what's the auditing process to check that it's been spent? And does the funding go all to the lead applicant, or does the department distribute it?
So the simple answers are we pay quarterly on a schedule, so we'll negotiate it. You'll indicate how much money you're requesting. The minister will in the end approve that, or otherwise, and then we'll design an annual amount, but also split that up into quarterly amounts where we'll pay based on sufficient progress of the project, and we judge that based on a report you give us. We'll also give you the first payment essentially in advance as well on execution of the grant agreement. I think that's what are the other elements of the question I missed there, but yeah, payments are quarterly, and yeah, an audit is required at the end of the project, 90 days after the end of the project finishes.
That's great, thank you. And then there's an interesting question. Can the application be formed based on 2 partners only, where one is the industry partner and one's the research institute?
No, 2 partners, no. Well, no. So you got to have the minimum 3 partners in this program. It's come out of the CRC program. It's a collaboration program, less of a linking 2 organisations together. So I guess we're looking at that, building that more collaboration skill set across the industry and research partners.
That's great. This is a great one. And I think I can give the answer to this, but I'm going to let Martin give the answer to it. Does previous success in attracting CRC-P support count against future applications?
Well, no, I'd say, yeah, the applicants are assessed on the basis of what they've submitted. So yeah, I think yeah, if it's for the same project, sure, yeah, we're not going to fund the same thing twice, but if it's continuation development of the project, and if you look down our list, we've got companies and they've been involved in these presentations before. Defentex, I believe, had 4 different grants from us, at least 3. So there is definitely cases of applicants being successful, and they're just assessed on the merits of the new proposal.
Yeah, we have at our conference every year, we have Defentex come and talk, because they have been through the program so many times. They've been unsuccessful and successful, but they've had 4 grants. And so, Siobhan, that's always good for you to know that you've got future capacity there too. Of course, what it's really about is does the project that's proposed align with what the program is trying to do, and are you able to demonstrate that value proposition and the industry need and research capability to deliver it? Sorry, I turned myself off. Just trying to get through some more of these questions. Some of them are a little specific, so we'll take them offline so that we can deal with that. Would a research project that so this is an interesting one. So this goes back to research-led, industry-led. Would a research project that utilises the combination of 2 established medical devices to overcome an industry-identified program be appropriate? So, Ross, I'm taking this as, is the research project led by a research institution, if they're the lead partner, it would be ineligible. If it's the industry partners, I say, bringing it, it would be considered in the normal round of things. Is that a right reading of it, Martin?
Yeah, I'm trying to just get to
Ross Sutherland.
Yeah, I'm seeing the question. I think if there's a research project that you two different things that exist and you're bringing them together, and it needs some collaborative research that's going to address an industry problem, and you've got the industry partners that need that addressed, whether it's like combining AI with some other project that exists, and that'll then improve improve the outcomes. I guess that would be super. I can see something like that being successful. Most things that we do get projects are already partway down that like research path as well.
That's great. And look, I'm just going to do a couple more of the questions. There was one there that's kind of interesting, and I've seen this one come up before. And there's also one there around, there's a couple that are related. So it's a question around industry associations. So there's a question here from Sunil. Can an industry association count as an industry partner if they have an ABN, and very often they do, and the funds to contribute as a representative of sector of the whole? And there was another question, I'm just trying to find that's similarly related, which was if there were a group of SMEs and that was the approach they took to try and approach it, could they do it?
Well, maybe go back and look at the definition in our guidelines. That's what we apply. I know I've said that a few times. Are they trading, tending to trade? Some of them tests, particularly around the industry partner side. So does industry association do that? I guess I don't know enough about that entity in particular to be able to provide any specific advice. But in terms of like pooling funds and putting them in, like I guess we're looking at providing funds to the actual businesses on the ground. Like CRC model is a little bit more of a coordination model, the larger CRCs where there is a company established to run the CRC itself. But I guess one of the things our program has been doing is providing money to the actual companies that are there, doing the work, doing the commercialization. So it's more I've said like a firm-based program rather than a whole of sector-based program, which the CRC, the bigger grants are more targeted at.
Excellent. There's a couple of great questions here. One, they're kind of related to each other. So one from Filippo Valente and one from Richard Jones. And so one is it accepted that the contributions from the three project partners, SMEs and research, are not equal? So in their case, it's industry research contribution, which would mainly be educational. And then following on from that, there's a really nice question from Richard, which is why has it been structured so that there are two industry sponsors? And I think it goes back to some of your own thing around the notion of the program is building collaborations.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's about building collaboration, and the design of the program is about having, I guess, it's not just one, just two parties working together. And there's other programs around government that support them sort of relationships. So it's about that broader requirement to have bigger collaborations. And it is the CRC program, the bigger CRC grants, they typically start at 20 partners and just go up from there. So it's like the smaller version of that. So I guess that's why that is in place. And the first component was around the even distribution of partners. Like we rarely see, say, a 3-partner project that has 3 partners all putting in the same amount. It depends on their capacity to put in. It depends on the benefits they're going to receive from it. Like, to be honest, often it's the lead partner who's driving it forward because they've got the most. They often have the most to gain, but because of that, they're often putting in the lion's share of the contributions. But sometimes they're less so, and they're like a small business that's just got a good idea and got a university that's keen to work with them on that, and they're maybe bringing in a big player that may be able to, be the retailer of the product as well, and buy it from the smaller business.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just do a couple more of the questions, that I'm going to get some final words from Siobhan and Martin before we wrap up. We will try to work through any questions we didn't answer and see if we can either include appropriate links or some response for you in the follow-up email. There's a question here, and this comes up back in the days, the growth centres used to provide some input into CRCs. The question is, does the assessment process involving you seeking input from other parts of government or departments to inform the decision making?
Yes, well, it does. We reach out to the policy areas of government to seek their views and applications, because they often have some expertise and intelligence around that. So yeah, we do seek advice for our committee. That just goes into the pool of information that goes to our committee for their assessments.
Excellent. And there's a question here about what happens if you plan to start your project in January and something happens and you need to push your date out? What happens if people need to vary the timeline on their grant?
Well, yeah, well, talk to us. Like, for those that have been in the program for a while, we've had a few rounds where we didn't get the outcomes out as early as we hoped to. So we're like we had to work with people to push the dates out because some of them had already passed. So we will, we're definitely pushing out. We would like all projects to start in the first 6 months of next year, because we have to manage our budgets as well. I think the application indicates that they should start by 30 June. So we can work with you if things if you need to push it out a month or so. It still means we'll try to get a contract in place with you though by sort of that time earlier on.
Great. Thank you. Look, I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to hand over to Siobhan for any last minute words of advice to everybody here who's thinking about applying. Then I'll jump back to Martin, then we'll wrap up. So Siobhan, over to you for any last minute words of advice.
Good luck. And yeah, I think it's, the thing I would take from it, I know that grant money is helpful, but having a successful relationship with a research organisation like a university is a win already. So finding the right partner can take time, and that's more important than applying for this grant. Sorry, and it's my words of advice, because I think those partnerships can be extremely lasting. The great thing about CRC-P, it ignites that relationship and really can, so from CRC-P we've been able to have a much more greater relationship than we probably otherwise would have. So yeah, I think take your time to find the right relationships.
That's great advice, Siobhan. And look, we see some of the really successful collaborations that have come out of this project. They've been existing ones. They've really been able to lift with this project, but then they've gone on to do other things and develop other things. So it's looking at it as part of the journey of that partnership. Martin, any last words from you, apart from the obvious, which is get it in well before 5 p.m. on the day?
Yeah, I won't say that, but I guess I suggest maybe if you're not ready to apply, look, we've got the future rounds, a commitment to hold them. So maybe consider holding off to the next round. We're getting a few indications this round is going to be bigger than the 77 that I flagged up earlier for last round. The number of people on this webinar, I think we'll probably have a look, but probably double what we had this time 6 months ago. So yeah, if you're not ready, look, we've managed to get that published schedule out. So hopefully you can wait till you are. But otherwise, good luck. And if you have any questions, the business.gov.au contact centre is available on extended business hours. So yeah, they're your best call if you really want questions answered quickly.
Fantastic. And with 3 minutes to go, I have I'll just share my screen if that works. Is that working? Yeah, sorry. Maybe I won't, if I can't get it to share. Okay, I won't worry about that. Thanks. So I'm going to unshare. Sorry, everybody, a little technical error at this end. So I want to just say a big thank you to Martin and to Siobhan for being so generous with their time and their expertise and knowledge today. I want to say thank you to all of you who attended, both for your interest in the CRC-P grants, but also for the work that you do that helps translate Australian research into new products, services and ways of doing things for Australia. It's really important. It's critical for our economic development. We are contactable at any time. We'll send out our contact details in the thank you email along with answers to these questions. Feel free to get in touch. Martin's team is always the team to go to for technical questions, but we're always happy to see what we can do to help with other questions. And if you want to stay up to date with what is happening, feel free to sign up for our newsletter too. We'll send out that link. But thank you so much for all of you coming today, and thanks Siobhan and Martin for participating. Have a fantastic rest of the afternoon, everybody.